Welcome to Passion for Sound, the channel dedicated to thorough and honest reviews of headphones, earphones, DACs, headphone amps, other components and accessories. Basically everything audio related except power amps and passive speakers. My name's Lachlan and my goal is to explore and discuss all kinds of audio topics, even the controversial ones, to help us all find more enjoyment from music. Thanks for watching and enjoy the video. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today we're talking pads, Yaxi Pads to be precise. What I've got here in front of me is a whole range of Yaxi Pads kindly provided by Groove Central here in Australia, so I want to say a huge thank you to Guy from Groove Central for making this review possible. He's allowed me to have a whole bunch of pads to demo with different headphones, to take measurements, and to share all of this with you. So strap in, this one's going to cover a lot of ground, but hopefully not in too much time. So without any further ado, let's jump in and take a look at the range of Yaxi Pads that I've got here. The first thing I should say before we get too far into this is that I can only try these pads with the headphones I've got. Yaxi very deliberately make it clear that a number of their pads, whilst being designed for different models, will fit multiple options across the headphone market. And so in this case, I have used pads that were not specifically designed for particular headphones, but they're the headphones I had on hand, and they're the headphones that Yaxi say the pads will also fit. The question is, will they sound good if they've been designed for a different headphone? And it's a bit of a mixed bag, as you're going to see shortly. I think the best way to work through this is to first of all tell you the experiences I've had with each individual headphone and pad combination, and then I'm going to move on to talking about the overall impression I've been left with having played with lots of different Yaxi pads. Let's start with a look at the K712 Pro. In this case, this is a pad made specifically for the K712 Pro, so it's got a special locking mechanism on the back of the pad that therefore means it's limited what it will fit. I happen to have the K712 Pro here, and therefore it was an option for me to test. The Yaxi pads are a leather outer with a velour inner, as opposed to the standard all velour pad that comes on the K712s. The K712 comforts come in at $59 US. Now I don't have any Australian dollar prices as yet, but I will put a link down below for those of you in Australia so you can jump through to the Groove Central website and buy directly from Guy at Groove Central. There's no kickbacks or affiliations here. He's just a retailer and supplier that's provided these to me for an honest and open review. And again, as you'll hear with lots of my reviews, not everything is rosy. So this is just an opportunity for me to say thank you to him for allowing me to share this information with you. So I'll put that link down below, but for now, $59 US is the price for the K712 Pro pads direct from the Yaxi website. In terms of comfort, these are a little bit softer than the standard velour pad, and so they are very comfortable and very plush on the ears, but for some people it may lead to your ears touching the inside of the cup. Now the inside of the cup is also very, very soft, and I've had no issues with comfort at all, but I do want to raise it because I know some people are very sensitive to that. All importantly, of course, though, is how do the pads change the sound? And as you'll see from the graph on screen, there is a significant shift, but I actually think it's one for the better. I find the K712s in their stock form a pretty ho-hum headphone. I haven't actually reviewed them here on the channel because I haven't had time to fit them in, and I haven't felt like they're that important a headphone to share because they're a little bit lacking in wow factor or dynamics. They're very easy to listen to, but that's about all that I'd say they've got going for them. Once the Yaxi pads go on though, it's a bit of a different story. What you find is that all of a sudden the bass is brought down a little bit, the mid-range and vocals are brought forward a little bit, and it becomes a more neutral and much more revealing headphone. It doesn't turn it into some sort of giant killing monster, but it's absolutely a really nice sounding headphone with the Yaxi pads, and they're my preference over the stock. I find the Yaxi pads improve the treble quality, and the combination of the reduced bass plus the improved treble quality, to me, makes vocals through the AKG 712s with the Yaxi Pads a really, really enjoyable listen. They've suddenly gone for me from a headphone that I very rarely reach for to one that I've reached for quite a lot lately. I tried them for a very brief session of gaming, not that I have much time for that these days, but I found they were great for gaming because of that wonderful focus on the details that sit within that mid-range area without getting harsh or fatiguing overall. I wasn't playing a first-person shooter, so I can't comment on how good they are at spatial information around a battlefield or something like that, but I did thoroughly enjoy the overall tonal presentation in the gaming context. As I go through all these pads, I'm going to tell you at the end of each one whether or not I would buy it, and in the case of the K712 Pro pads, the comfort pads that is from Yaxi, I would absolutely buy those, and I'm thoroughly enjoying having them on the headphone. So with that said, let's move on now to the TH900 pads. Now these are designed, as the name would suggest, for the TH900s from Fostex. Sadly, I don't have those here, despite being pretty keen to get a set in my collection one day, but I don't have them here for now, and so instead, I've tried them on the HiFiMan HE4XX, the drop version, and also the Sundaras. In order to do that, you do have to buy an additional adapter, which is $10 from Yaxi. The pads themselves are $58, so if you're looking at them on HiFiMans, you're looking at $68 for the full setup. Of course, if you've got an old set of pads that have worn out, you can always steal the ring, the attachment ring, from the old pads and use it with the Yaxi pads so you don't have to buy the adapter. So $58 for the pads and $10 extra for the adapter. As I mentioned, I tried these on both the HE4XX and the Sundara, and as you might be able to tell from the fact that I'm holding the HE4XX in this review, the Sundara I didn't enjoy them on, the HE4XX I didn't mind. The design of the Yaxi pads is a little bit different from the stock. All the HiFiMan pads these days use a combination of leather on the outside and velour where it touches your ear. That's on all of the round series headphones so far that I've tried. And in the case of the Yaxis, things look similar at first go. But what you'll then realise is that the tilt that is normally going from thick at the back to angled at the front changes on the Yaxi pads so that the seam is down the bottom of the headphone. I'm assuming this is how it's designed because of the oval opening. And so you get a thicker section now at the top and thinner at the bottom. That may slightly change imaging characteristics and sound staging because it's taking a slight angle of the driver and bringing it back to flat. I didn't specifically notice that in my testing, but I did want to flag that that's normally what angling is used for. Something else I noticed about these pads is they're a firmer pad than the stock HiFiMan pads, and therefore they will increase clamping force. For some people that's going to be a bonus, for some people a drawback. I personally find it at first a little bit off-putting. It's just a bit firmer than I'm used to, but not uncomfortable once I've worn them for a while. Talking about the sound from these, on the Sundara, I found it thinned out their sound a little bit, and for me, that took away from the magic of the Sundaras. I love their tonal characteristics through the mid-range and the ability to focus the presence around the vocal areas. I really enjoy that, and the Yaxi pads took away from that and left them sounding just like another average everyday headphone. So for me, I wouldn't buy them for the Sundaras. On the HE4XX though, it's a bit of a different story. I found on the HE4XX, it felt like it brought a bit of extra weight to the sound that I really appreciated, and whilst it may have brought a bit of extra unnecessary emphasis in the mid-range that was maybe not ideal, the overall balance for me was a slightly preferable sound on the HE4XX, and that's why you can see they're still attached. I haven't fully decided yet if I'm going to keep them on the HE4XX or go back to the stock pads, but for me, the decisions are for the Sundara, I wouldn't buy the TH900 comfort pads. For the HE4XX as a replacement pad, I would buy. As an alternate sound signature, I might buy. And probably I'd lean towards would buy because I think they look like they're better made. They're really nice feeling pads. And so in that respect, I probably would buy them overall because the sound is different, definitely not worse, and maybe better. Enjoying this video? If you are and you'd like to help me make more videos like this one, there are lots of ways you can help, and most of them don't cost you a cent. You can help for free by liking this video, subscribing and ringing the bell, sharing this video on social media or your favourite audio forums, or by making your next purchases using any of the affiliate links in the description. Obviously that's not technically free, but you're not spending anything extra and it all helps out. Want to go a step further? You could buy some merchandise, t-shirt, hoodies, caps and the like, or you can join the Passion for Sound family on Patreon. It's a growing community with plenty of interesting discussion and your chance to influence what happens on the channel. Check out the description for more information and links where relevant. But for now, let's get back to the video. So now let's get into the most complicated part of this review, and that is all of the options for the trusty ATH-M50X here. Now, none of these pads are designed specifically for the ATH-M50X, and as you'll see shortly, it's pretty obvious from the results. So I've got 3 different pads to try here. The stock pads that you can see here are this oval, fairly shallow, quite firm, simple pad, and they're a leather finish. In the case of the Yaxis, there's lots of different options to talk about. We've got the original stPad, which looks very similar to the stock pad, but is a slightly softer leather, probably similar squishiness, but also a slightly narrower profile. We've then got the stPads 2, which are a narrower leather with a flatter profile, and on the inside, which you'll see in the photos I've taken, you've got half of it is leather, which goes to the back, and half of it velour or suede, which goes to the front. And when I say suede, you might call it Alcantara. I refer to it as suede. I don't know if actually they're the same or different, but when I'm saying suede, think Alcantara. So you've got this soft, irregular section that's meant to sit at the front of the pad, and the smooth leather section at the back of the pad. And in theory, that should change the sound performance. I'll talk about that in just a moment when I go through the pads, but I wanted to explain what each of them were first before I talked about sound. You might have also noticed that the stPads 2 here have a red and a blue version here, and you can get the same color scheme in the original stPad as well. So if you do like the idea of having color coded for your left and rights to make putting on the headphone quick and easy when you pick them up, you can do that with both versions of the stPad. The final pad that I have here is the MSR7 pad, so also designed for an Audio-Technica headphone, but not the M50X. This is more of a comfort style pad where you've got leather around the outside and you've got velour or suede Alcantara on the inside that touches your face. So we've got 3 different pads here replacing the stock pads on the M50X, and 3 very different results in terms of the sound it produces. Before I talk about the sound, let me step through each of the pads having introduced them and give you a quick summary of my impressions of the comfort and the design, as well as the pricing. The regular stPad first is $40 direct from Yaxi. It's a nicely designed pad. It feels slightly more comfortable to me than the stock pads on the M50 because the leather is a bit more supple. In terms of sound, it does change the signature of the headphones slightly, but maybe not as drastically as the graph I'm showing you now would suggest. It brings the vocals forward a little bit, and it opens the soundstage slightly as well, which I quite enjoyed. But it might get fatiguing for some people, so I'm not going to say it's a flat-out recommendation on these. I think they're a nice option from a comfort and quality point of view, but they are going to change the sound of your M50s, so if you love how they sound now, this might not be a great option. If you wish the M50 had a tiny bit more mid-range presence and vocal presence, then these might be a really good choice. Overall, I've rated them as would buy, but it's would buy in the context of the fact that I'm comfortable with the changes being not a bad thing, but it is worth noting it's different and not everybody's going to love it. So let's move now to the stPad 2. I was the most excited about these of all of the pads. I love the design. I think they look fantastic. I love the blue and red. I thought the concept of having the front-facing section of the pad being this irregular velour suede section, and then having the leather at the back to potentially maintain the standard sound quality, all of that to me looked like a great idea. So I was really excited to put them on. They're then really comfortable because of this beautiful large opening. They sit really nicely on the ears without putting any major pressure anywhere. So I thought they were great in that respect, but then I listened to them, and the sound out of these is really not great to my ears. Now I need to specify here though that I am only talking about the sound of these with the M50X. If you have any other headphone of different tuning, the results you get are going to be different to mine with the M50X. What I found that these did mostly was suck out a lot of the mid-range detail. So it would be fantastic on a headphone that is a bit too thick and mid-range focused to start with, but not so good if you're already happy with the mid-range tonality. As I said, the look, the feel, the comfort, everything about these I love. It's just a shame that the sound changes don't work well with the M50X. So have a think about whether they'd suit the headphones that you have. There are listings on the Yaxi website as to what else all of these fit, but for me with the M50X, it's a wouldn't buy for the stPad 2. I'd steer clear of these. And that leads me to the final pad that I've tried with the M50X here, and that's the MSR7 Comforts. So as I said before, these are not designed for the M50X, and I must admit they were really hard to fit because they're just a tiny bit smaller than the actual cutout section for the M50X pads. So it was a bit of a hassle to get them on, but once I got them on, I was fairly happy to not take them off again. The MSR7 pads come in at $39 US on the Yaxi website. As I said before, they're a leather outer and actually I think I said velour before, but it's a suede inside or an Alcantara inside here, and they're a very comfortable pad. They're a bit thicker in profile than the stock pads and a little bit softer as well, so the end result is a more comfortable fit and a much more snug fit because the opening is a touch smaller than the stock M50 pads here. I found that these improved the bass a little bit and gave a bump to the mids as well. So in that regard, they're not vastly dissimilar to the original ST pads, and some people are probably going to prefer the original ST pad because the bump in the mid-range on these I felt was a bit more pronounced. That said, the comfort on these was excellent, and so I'd probably toss and turn between whether I went with the ST pads or the MSR7 comfort pads. My end rating on these was that I would buy them maybe for the MSR7s, whereas I would buy definitely the ST pads, recognizing that both sets do change the sound signature of the headphones. So in all of these cases, particularly where I'm testing pads that weren't designed specifically for that headphone, do take into account that the changes you're seeing in frequency response may be different when applied to different headphones. And that's part of the fun of rolling pads, just the way it is for rolling tubes, rolling capacitors, anything you can roll, tip rolling on IEMs, any of these things you can flip and change. It's part of the fun to get them and to try them out. And so a lot of this review is to give you an idea of what's available from Yaxi and the quality of them and the design of them, more so than specific decisions on what sounds good. Of course, I can tell you what sounds good and not good on the headphones I have, but if you've got different headphones that these pads fit, the best thing I can recommend is grab a set of pads and try them for yourself. So we've got 2 more pad types to go, and one of them should not surprise you, because anyone that's heard of Yaxi Pads before has likely heard of the Yaxi Pads for PortaPro. If you haven't ever seen the PortaPros, these are a very unique headphone in the sense that there's not much like them around anymore. They're a collapsible, fold-up, very retro style looking headphone that is cheap and simple but sounds pretty good. Now these have got the yellow Yaxi Pads on here. Yaxi make all different colors for these, so you can get the retro orange look, you can get red, you can get black of course as well. You can choose what you like. They retail for $20 US for 2 sets from the Yaxi website, and so you can mix and match your colors if you want to. Compared to the stock pads that come on the PortaPros, these are much thicker and also a broader pad as well. So the overall diameter of them is larger, which means more surface area, comforting and padding against your ear, but also the foam itself is thicker and therefore has a bit more softness to it. So the overall result is a much more comfortable feel if you're wearing these for an extended period. And if you're not familiar with the PortaPros, you'll enjoy wearing them for an extended period because they sound great. The good news is when you put on the Yaxi Pads, they get even better. The Yaxi Pads improve the bass response from these, and they just smooth out a little bit of harshness that comes from the relatively cheap design of the PortaPros. Whilst being a great sounding headphone, they do have a little bit of edginess because they're pretty cheap and probably use a pretty basic driver. Having a thicker piece of foam between your ear and the driver itself means you can filter out a little bit of the edginess and get a smoother sound without losing what makes the COS PortaPros so much fun. There's not a lot more to say about these. They're just a foam pad. They just happen to be thicker and a little bit broader, and the result for me is overall a massive improvement, and I would absolutely buy these if you have the PortaPros or the very, very similarly designed KSC 75s. So with a resounding recommendation for the PortaPro pads, let's wrap things up with my final headphone. And that is the DT880 here. So this is the special edition black version DT880 250 ohm, but it's going to fit any of the DT880s or indeed any of the DT series like your 770s, 1990s, anything that's got this standard round cup design from Beyerdynamic. The pads I'm talking about here are the AKG K240 or K271 pads from Yaxi. These retail for $42 US from the Yaxi website, and they're a pure leather pad unlike the velour pads that come on the DT880s. They're also a flatter profile pad, so the velours are quite rounded and quite firm, but still soft enough obviously to be comfortable, whereas these are a flatter pad and a little bit more squishy. What they also do is they change the opening to an oval opening instead of being the round opening of the velours. And overall I found that putting these on, I felt like maybe they weren't sealing as well as they should compared to what I'm used to with the velours. That said, there were no issues at all with the sound quality and the isolation because the bass response was still excellent. As you'll see from the graph I put on screen, using the leather K240 pads here increases the bass quite significantly and totally changes the tonal characteristics of the DT880. In my mind, I think it's in some ways better. It takes away some of the hollowness in the mids and the emphasis on the upper treble, and to me makes for a fun, enjoyable headphone. It's in no way reference, and therefore it's not like it's improving it to a flat response, but it's changing the tonality in a way that I quite enjoy. And in fact, it rather reminds me of the 3rd generation Beyerdynamic T5, which I absolutely love, and I have a pair over here behind me. As you'll see from the graphs, there are very big differences still between the DT880 with the 240 pads and the T5s, but it's got some similarities in terms of the overall shape of the curve, frequency response curve I mean, and that's probably where the reminiscence is coming from. For me, it's like making the DT880s kind of a poorer version of the T5s, but a fun way to change up the tonality and enjoy a different sound. Some of you out there will not be a fan of what the K240 pads do to the DT880, and that's all going to come down to personal preference, whether you like the bassier sound or whether you like the more traditionally V-shaped sound of the stock DT880 setup with the velour pads. That's all going to be personal preference. All I can say is that I think I would buy these for the DT880. I don't think they're quite as comfortable, but I do enjoy the sound they produce. The biggest issue for me, I think, is it's a shame about this little oval opening for your ears. I do feel like that gets in the way of the comfort slightly compared to the nice large round opening that the velours have. That said, they're nicely made, they fit well, and they're quite comfortable in the scheme of things, just not as comfortable as the velours. So having been through all of these different pads, sharing the measurements with you, talking about my sound impressions of them, the thing I wanted to wrap up with is to say that my experience with the Yaxi Pads has been that they are all wonderfully made. They're really nice quality leather, they all feel really well stitched and like they're going to last a very long time. The biggest issue for me with them is that they are designed for specific headphones and therefore may not perform the way you want them to on headphones they weren't designed for, even though they might fit. Case in point, the M50x. Out of the 3 pads I had here, I'd probably only recommend one, and even then it's recommending it with a caveat that it's going to change the sound. I did like the MSR7 pad, but I don't know that I'd recommend it because of the more significant shift in the frequency response. The standard stPad would be my choice, but it's still with the caveat of a change in sound signature. So with all of these, I think you need to be conscious that what you're buying is likely to change the sound slightly. In some cases it's dramatic, like with the M50X. In other cases it's pretty minor, like with the HiFiMans using the TH900 comfort pads. And even with a headphone like the K712 Pro, where it was designed for that particular headphone, it's still changing the frequency response. In my mind it's for the better, but you might be different to me and prefer the original sound of the K712s. So go into it with your eyes open, buy these pads knowing that it's about having some fun, playing with some different sound signatures. The good news is they all feel great, they're comfortable, they're well made, and I don't think you can go too far wrong for the price, given that they all look and feel great. After that, it's all about the experience of trying different pads to see what you like and which ones improve the sound of your favorite headphones. So thanks once again to Guy from Groove Central for making this review possible. As I said before, if you're in Australia and you're interested in these pads or anything else that Groove Central has to offer, check out the link below to go through to the website and see what they have available. If you're outside of Australia, I'll put a link down below through to the Yaxi website where you can check out all the different pads available, what they fit and what the various options are. As always, if you found this review useful, please think about hitting the subscribe button and hit the like button. It really helps the channel out and helps me to bring more videos like this to you and others like you. For now though, I'll leave you to the music, so happy listening and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.